This is Debbie Kyle-Levitt. Welcome to our conversation on the ancient temples of Malta. Many of us who are fascinated with places like Stonehenge and the Pyramids were surprised to learn that the really well-preserved temples on the beautiful Mediterranean islands of Malta and Gozo are even older than those ancient places. This particular view is of the beautiful underground temple of the Hypogeum on Malta that's over 5,000 years old, which we'll discuss later. In this video, we are considering what wisdom is being discovered in these places and of how their apparent alternative practices and ways of living that we simply haven't enjoyed for millennia might serve us now. With this in mind, I'm presenting some excerpts from online workshop conversations with colleagues on the subject of Malta, as we enjoyed my PowerPoint on information about the places at Malta, along with the works of various artists in tune with the inherent wisdom available at these sites. Two primary featured artists, Francis Xavier Aloisio and Jenny Caruana, are Maltese artists intuiting the sites themselves. We'll have their commentaries as well. So, of course, major contributors to this conversation are the artists themselves, whose work is included in this presentation. I'm really grateful to them, as well as to the people who participated in the discussion about our Maltese elders. They include experts on our sacred sites, Andrea McConna Pinkham, who has led groups to various sites like these for over 20 years, artist Terry Smith, our gifted singer and music therapist Beth Bulwark, who helps address the acoustical wonders of Malta, herbalist and astrologer Lisa Allen, our wise expert on UK sites Ange Jones, and Dr. Don Woodwell. All are well educated in the related subject areas. I'll be making contact information for the artists and the speakers at the end of this presentation. For those unfamiliar with Malta's location, this is a photo taken from the International Space Station showing the tiny nation of Malta in the lower left, with the largest island of Malta and the second largest, Gozo, just above it. You'll see it, small dot there, and that would be them. Nearby Sicily and Italy are also visible to orient you a bit. Our approach and foundation of our conversation is that to engage and speak with our intelligent ancestors and to allow them to speak to us in a form that we can understand, logic would tell us that we need universal shared languages. We need to have a conversation across time and across space. We can look at the skies that we share, available through our astronomy, while astrology does provide our related ancient mythology. We can carry that language as well. We also have the language of music vibration and physical symbols and shared forms that are found in nature and art. The Maltese Islands are really amazingly rich in all these areas and speak to us so beautifully across ages and cultures. Our artists and our love do the rest in this conversation. It will follow. Part one of our presentation was inspired by Maltese artist, author, and former priest Francis Xavier Aloisio, whose ideas we'll be sharing throughout this video. One thought that he shared in the second book in his trilogy based in Malta, The Age of Wisdom and Reason, is based on the idea of creation emanating from vibration and duality. This particular inspired visual expression, this painting, is actually by artist Susan Tower of Kansas City, obviously of Stonehenge. Now, what's interesting is that the twin energies of the universe that set the process of creation in motion are physically reflected in the twin islands of Malta and Gozo. As quantum physics reveals, we are the product of and resonate to the electromagnetic, the creative receptive, like artist and audience, the masculine and feminine, the Aum, vibrating together in perfect oneness.
They've actually heard a lot of the lore that's carried down through history through the Maltese people, but also there are intuitive experiences. And this gentleman was a priest who actually, had actually been a missionary in Peru. So it was an interesting tie. And he now also works in Cambria. So he's the West Coast is also part of his interest, but he left the priesthood and got more into this work, and he does a lot of paintings and photographs, and you can see this was him, I think, leading a group out to one of the sites on Gozo, and This was one of the quotes from his book. It is that the truth is that before creation there was universal mind, the creative power and the unifying intelligence that pervades creation in all dimensions. In the beginning there was the void, a timeless, spaceless vacuum devoid of all physical matter but full of quantum energy fluctuations. From this continuous movement of energy was born pure consciousness, which then filled the void and created matter through the vibration of sound, bringing order, unity, and equilibrium into time and space. All matter is sound, and sound is the original aspect of creation. Sound frequencies and vibrations are the origin of all life. Sort of like in the beginning was the word, and they are finding that what seems to make things take form or things to come into matter is something asymmetrical in the energies. So he's basically, I think, saying that same thing. Just wondered if you two had any thoughts, or obviously a lot of people have read things similar to this, but do you have any thoughts or feelings?
There's something called, I think, cyanetics, which is the way that music affects water, and it creates the most incredible patterns. You just need to put sand or water, anything like this, on a sheet, and then vibrate that sheet, and you don't just get random sort of patterns. You get things that look like snowflakes, really beautiful patterns. It's extremely remarkable.
It's so fascinating, and it just starts to give us a feeling of how creative we can be. And the power that we have, that I think in some ways, I think we're less aware of it because it's a little frightening to us, just to know the kind of power we can access and use. So.
And the interesting thing also is, I was reading recently that the human body is made up of about over 90% water within the cells, as well as actually just within the body. And the person who was writing this, who was a scientist, he wasn't sort of from the sort of New Age sort of area, but he was saying that basically we are creatures made of water. And when you think of that, anything electrical is obviously going to have an effect, then anything with vibration is obviously going to have an immense effect on us, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think we're little resonance bodies.
As I was considering the idea of creation emanating through sound vibration, I couldn't think of anyone better than Brian Wilson, who gave us good vibrations a few decades ago, to give us that sense of the aum of oneness. What I loved about this particular layering of his voice was that he tucked it into one of his pop songs and just gave us a remarkable rendering of what the shamans must have sought to create with the oracle niches in the hypogeum, as we'll discuss.
I thought was really interesting. It was just what you were talking about, Ange. This happens to be a really delicate granules that they used they were using sound to see what shapes were taking place. And an earthquake happened, and this was the shape it formed, which I thought was fascinating. It looks just
Amazing.
it looks just like a rose in the middle, and it has that beautiful shape of, say, like a calla lily, or like a vulva, like a woman's, the sacred V of the woman. And I thought that was really remarkable that an earthquake would create those beautiful forms, and it just shows you sort of the nature, and that vibration is vibration. That's a big one, and things fall down, but we get new. It's the transformational part of it. So fascinating.
At Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, that was made famous by Dan Brown, they found a lot of these sort of symbols, and they realised it was a piece of music recorded in the stone, and the guy has actually put it together as a piece of music.
Amazing. Is it that's accessible somewhere, Ange, or is it?
Oh yes, yeah. You can find it online. If you go to Rosslyn Chapel, the guy has actually taken a note of the shape. Some of them may have been damaged somewhat by time.
Sure.
But they've actually created a whole piece of music. So Rosslyn Chapel actually records ancient music.
Isn't it remarkable, the things that were left to us by people who had to know something? That's just amazing to me. and I just keep noticing that the artists create these things. I love the way Diego Rivera had the shape of her skirt looking like a calla lily, and she's like a beautiful flower. That was one of their, the Gelmans were, he was a filmmaker in Mexico, and they were some of the biggest supporters of Rivera's work, so that's how she ended up being painted, but she was certainly a beautiful flower to be painting and to begin with, so I thought that was just a really interesting combination. And okay, now one thing that's so fascinating to me is that the islands themselves, there are two major islands, Malta and then one that's a bit smaller, Gozo. And Malta distinctly has a masculine energy, whereas they have the temples of both, and you certainly feel both energies. And Gozo is distinctly feminine, and you feel those energies as well there very intensely. And it all seems to be about the balance of the masculine and feminine. It seems to be something they're communicating to us, whatever wise people were telling us about another cycle of life. And there's also reference to the beginning and completion of creation that it actually lives there in those rich verdant hills and the rocky cliffs and the caves and the temples rising from the waters, and that dreamland underground that they have created thousands of years ago.
With this replication of this duality of the twin islands and the temples, either paired together or with a nearby cave, there's a sense of the quantum view of creativity and life made visual in the Mandelbrot set pictured here, with life replicating and recreating itself endlessly.
Great. Then I'm going to quote Francis again from his second book. And he says, universes are created and built through the energetic pulse of electricity and magnetism. The masculine and feminine energies, the solar and the lunar, the yin and yang, the fire and water, when these are in resonance and in motion or in love and light, they are the fundamental building principles of the universe. The basic manifestation of male presence is that of being the source and momentum, while the most basic female manifestation is that of consciousness and love, which binds the adamantine particles and gives them form and substance. This epic creation is repeated every day in the expression of love that binds two people. And I thought that was a gorgeous quote on top of just what it reflects, just a fundamental truth of creativity in our universe. This is another painting of Jenny Caruana's, and this I thought was quite beautiful. I believe this one was sourced in the Hypogeum, but here's her quote about her paintings, and it seemed to be placed near this one. It says, "I do believe that emotion is somehow printed into the fabric of time, and that sensitive people can feel this. Quantum physics is rapidly expanding the frontiers of conventional science and rediscovering the amazing ways that energies interact. It is entirely possible that ancient people instinctively knew more about the intricacies of life than we do. Perhaps it is time that we listen to their echoes." And just thought this was a beautiful painting. I don't know if you can make it out or if anybody has any comments about it, but you do see the spiral and then the man and woman in sort of a temple-looking site. Great. Then Andrea will remember these well.
Part of them reminds me.
Oh, yeah, I'll go back.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
No,
I was
please,
just going to say
Andrea.
reminds me of Sleep Goddess.
Yeah,
So, the fact that they're reclining
yeah, absolutely.
reminds me of that. I mean, maybe they were dreaming together instead of, the one sleeping goddess that was found. She was dreaming alone.
Right.
Say.
Since this is her intuitive, she could have very well had a sense of that. And who knows if these temples were used for sexual unions as well,
Exactly.
in a spiritual sense. We don't know, but it's certainly
Right.
a possibility.